I work retail, and I still remember how one customer turned my life into a nightmare. I've worked in retail long enough to know that some days are just chaos waiting to happen. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for or rather, the storm that came with Harry clocked in like any other Tuesday at the store. Mentally preparing myself for a steady stream of bored shoppers. The occasional kid tugging on displays, and maybe a manager asking me to do some tasks that had nothing to do with helping customers. I worked at a mid-sized electronics store in the city. Nothing fancy. Nothing glamorous. Just screens, headphones, and overpriced accessories. That fateful day, Gianna walked in like she owned the place. I didn't recognize her at first. She had that kind of sharp, calculating look some people carry like a weapon. Her heels clicked on the tile floor with an annoying rhythm, like she was daring someone to speak up and tell her to stop. I've heard stories from my coworkers who have had to help her in the past, but I had never had the misfortune of being her punching bag. Until today. "Hi," I said, stepping forward. "Can I help you find something today?" She turned toward me slowly, scanning my namatag like it mattered. "Yeah," she said in a tone that's supposed to imply superiority without actually saying anything specific. "I'm looking for the newest model of the X phone. You have it, right?" I swallowed the irritation bubbling in my chest. "We do have it in stock, but I'll need to check the back. It's in high demand," so she waved me off. "I don't have time for that. I want it now." I nodded politely. "Absolutely. I'll grab it for you in just a moment." And this was the first red flag. Most people were frustrated with waiting. But she wasn't frustrated. She was entitled. That subtle but lethal mix of impatience and self-importance that makes retail workers immediately tenside disappeared into the back room. Scanning the shelves until I found it. A shiny black box with the new X phone gleaming under the fluorescent light, perfect condition. I carried it out with a small smile, expecting relief on her face instead. She frowned. "Why isn't it in silver? Are you telling me I have to take the black one?" she demanded. Her voice was loud enough that a few nearby shoppers looked over, forced a calm smile. Unfortunately, silver sold out fast. "Black is the only one available today, but no," she interrupted, cutting me off mid-sentence. "I need silver. And I don't have time to wait. This is ridiculous." At this point, my stomach sank. I'd seen people like Gianna before, in passing. Retail Karens, my coworkers called them. But I'd never had one zero in on me personally like she did. There was something about her gaze, sharp and unrelenting. That made it clear this wasn't going to be easy. I tried to reason with her. "We do have a wait list, and I can call nearby stores to check availability. Or I can place an online order and have it shipped tomorrow." "No. You're going to fix this now," she said, throwing her hands up dramatically. "Do you understand? I'm a paying customer, and I shouldn't have to do any work for this." The first thing she did was ask for the manager. I could hear my manager's sigh from across the store before she even appeared. "Reggie, what's going on?" "Gianna wants a silver X phone," I explained. "We only have black." My manager gave me that weary nod, the one that says, "Good luck, buddy." She approached Diana, trying to calm her down, but it was hopeless. Gianna had already made up her mind. The world, this store, and everyone in it had conspired to inconvenience her, and it was my fault by association. I went back to my counter, trying to focus on other customers, but it was impossible. Every 5 minutes Gianna would approach someone else in the store, insisting on speaking to them about her silver X. She yelled over sales associates, waved her phone at them like she was proving some point, and even tried to get a discount for her trouble. By the time her interaction hit the 30-minute mark, a small crowd had gathered. People were whispering, some laughing quietly at her antics, but she was oblivious. She thrived on attention, and every second she was yelling. She was winning. I felt my stress level spike, and that's when I noticed Gianna had started filming the encounter. She held up her phone, aiming it at me as I tried to help another customer. I didn't notice it at first, and when I did, my stomach dropped.
"Oh, don't worry,"
she said sweetly, though her smile didn't reach her eyes.
"I'm just recording."
This so everyone can see how awful the service is here. That was it. That was the point where I realized this wasn't just a Silver X phone issue. She wanted to humiliate me, to turn my job into a public spectacle for her amusement. And the worst part? In retail, there's almost nothing you can do to stop it. The next hour felt like a blur. Gianna's behavior escalated in ways I couldn't have imagined. She demanded discounts. She accused me of hiding products. And she even started making thinly veiled threats about leaving a review that would ruin our reputation. I tried to stay calm, breathing through my nose, reminding myself that I didn't need to take the bait. But Gianna was relentless. And somehow, every time I helped another customer, she was there again. Insisting I personally attend to her every whim. By this point, Gianna had enlisted a few bystanders to support her. One woman came up and said, "Yeah, I can't believe how rude this place is." Another man nodded vigorously. It was like a mob mentality had kicked in, all because Gianna had started performing. I felt trapped. Every side of me closing in. I went to my manager again. "We can't deal with this. She's harassing me and the other customers." "This is beyond normal," my manager frowned. "I know, Reggie. I'm going to call corporate, but you need to stay calm. Don't give her anything to escalate. Stay calm." That's retail speak for endure the worst human behavior imaginable, without retaliating, or risk being fired. And I was this close to losing it. Gianna wasn't done. She asked me to open the backroom door to check inventory herself. When I refused, citing company policy, she started yelling about how I was hiding products on purpose and treating her like she was a criminal. Then came the social media part. She started live streaming, narrating my every move to God knows how many people. "Look at this. He's refusing to help me. Can you believe the nerve?" she said, pointing at me. I could feel my face getting hot. I was visible to strangers online, powerless to explain myself in real time. I tried to respond politely. "Ma'am, please step back. I'm happy to help, but I have to follow store policy." Her response was a laugh. A loud, sharp, triumphant laugh that echoed across the store. "Policy doesn't matter. I'm the customer, and you will help me." Customers were beginning to leave, shaking their heads, whispering about how unpleasant the scene was. But she didn't care. She was winning. And somehow, that made me angrier and more frustrated than anything else I remembered. Gianna's tactic wasn't just the yelling or the demands, it was attention. She wanted me, and everyone else, to focus on her, to bend to her will. And retail, unfortunately, is built on bending. At that point, I made a decision. I couldn't just survive this. I had to turn it around. I couldn't let her manipulate the store, me, and every customer in it. I needed a plan. But first, I needed backup. I called Gianna's bluff with a simple truth. "Ma'am, if you continue to harass me and other customers, I'll have to ask you to leave. Security will be called if necessary." Her eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't dare," she spat. "You don't want this on your record." I smiled, just slightly, because I did want it to stop. "I want it to stop more than anything," I said firmly. "But it has to stop now." It was the first time she hesitated. Just a flicker in her expression. but it was enough to realize that maybe, just maybe, this nightmare could have a resolution. And yet, in that moment, I had no idea how far Gianna was willing to push before someone finally put their foot down. By mid-afternoon, the store had transformed into something that felt less like a retail space and more like a battlefield. Gianna had somehow managed to turn the X-phone shortage into a spectacle of chaos. She wasn't just asking for a silver model anymore, she was testing limits, bullying other customers, and recording everything with a sense of glee that made my blood boil. I had tried the usual techniques: calm explanations, polite reasoning, directing her to other staff, offering wait lists, even contacting nearby stores. Nothing worked. Every attempt to help her backfired. Every time I approached, she turned it into an accusation or a performance, yelling at me, as if the world had personally wronged her. It wasn't just verbal anymore. She had enlisted bystanders to validate her narrative. One young woman said loudly, "Yeah, I can't believe they're treating you like that." Another man nodded and added, "I've never seen customer service this bad." Even strangers in the store began whispering and sneaking their phones out to record the situation. It was surreal. I had to remind myself that Gianna was a master manipulator. Everything she did was designed to provoke a reaction. If I raised my voice, she'd film it. If I ignored her, she'd escalate. And if I tried to reason with her, she'd twist it into an accusation. I stepped aside to regroup. My manager, seeing my tension, leaned in. "Reggie, I know it's bad, but keep your cool. Corporate is on the line, and you can't let her see you crack." I nodded, swallowing the frustration that threatened to boil over. I went back to the counter and saw her waving her phone toward a group of customers. "Look at this," she shouted. "They're refusing me. This is unacceptable." My hands clenched at my sides. But instead of snapping, I took a slow, deep breath. I needed a plan. I remembered something I'd learned in retail. People like Gianna thrive on control. They want the power to dictate your actions, to watch you squirm. The more they push, the more they feel victorious. To win, I needed to reclaim control, but without breaking store rules or escalating. First, I documented everything. Every demand, every accusation, every threat. Notes on my phone. Security cameras flagged for review. A record of her harassment. I knew that if this went further, I had to have proof that I acted professionally. Next, I set boundaries. "Ma'am," I said, firmly, projecting calm over the din of the crowd, "you've had plenty of time to select your phone. We've offered assistance in every possible way within our policy. If you continue to harass staff or other customers, we will have to ask you to leave." Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "You wouldn't dare," she spat. "I can make this go viral. I can ruin you." I didn't flinch. "We have a responsibility to all customers and staff. Your behavior is beyond acceptable limits. Security is here to help enforce that." The crowd was silent for a moment. Even some of the other shoppers seemed to take notice that Gianna was no longer entirely in control. I could feel a shift in energy. Then came the physical intimidation. She leaned over the counter, pointing a finger in my face, shouting, "You think you can stop me? I'm not leaving." I held my ground, raising my hands slightly, palms visible, projecting calm authority. Security immediately stepped in, standing on either side of her, guiding her back from the counter, without touching her aggressively. Her voice rose. "I'm calling corporate. I'm suing." One of the security officers interjected gently but firmly. "Ma'am, we've explained your options. You need to comply or leave the premises. You want to avoid involving law enforcement, but that may be necessary if you refuse." Her bravado faltered slightly, just enough to give me a sense that my strategy was working. Instead of reacting emotionally, I had documented, contained, and neutralized the immediate threats while maintaining professionalism. Meanwhile, and notice her social media activity, she was live streaming in short bursts, narrating her own version of events. Comments were pouring in, some supporting her, some questioning her behavior. I realized this was a public battle too. She wanted an audience, but the longer this went on, the more people could see that she was the one out of control. By the time she finally stormed out, filming herself dramatically, the crowd murmured in relief. Some even clapped quietly. The store felt like it had exhaled. I leaned against the counter, finally allowing myself a deep, shuddering breath. I had survived Gianna's assault on my patience, my dignity, and my day. But I knew this wasn't over. People online had seen bits and pieces of her life. My reputation could be at risk, and there could be further fallout. Still, for the first time in hours, I felt a tiny spark of victory. I hadn't snapped. I hadn't given in. And I had finally, carefully, turned the tables. The next day, saga continued, but this time, on a broader battlefield. I arrived at work to find the store buzzing with tension. Not because she was there physically angrily, she wasn't, but because her live stream from the day before had made the rounds online. Some clips showed her yelling, pointing, and harassing me. Other clips were edited to make it seem worse. As social media clips often are, her post had a caption like, "Terrible service at the electronics store. They treated me like dirt." I braced myself. My manager pulled me aside. "Reggie, some of our posts on social media are already getting comments." "We need a strategy," I nodded. "We need to show facts. Proof. Documentation. We need to be calm and professional about this." Together, we posted a measured, factual response, thanking customers for patience, clarifying store policy, and noting that the situation had been handled according to rules. No personal attacks, no emotional reactions, just facts. Meanwhile, Gianna tried to escalate online. She tagged the corporate account repeatedly, left comments threatening legal action, and encouraged followers to call the store. But I was ready. Every accusation we had anticipated. Every demand we could document. Every threat had evidence backing our professional conduct. By mid-morning, it became clear something remarkable was happening. The tide was turning. Online commenters began questioning her behavior. She was clearly the one overreacting, someone wrote. The employees stayed professional the whole time. Even her own followers started leaving comments suggesting she had gone too far. Her attempt to bully me and the store had backfired. People were now scrutinizing her behavior, not ours. She attempted one last push. She came back to the store, determined to film another scene. This time, she demanded the manager meet her personally. Security was ready. I stayed back, documenting everything. Her entrance drew attention, but instead of fear or panic, people in the store watched disapprovingly. I could see the realization on her face. She was losing control of the narrative. Security calmly guided her to a private area and explained, clearly and firmly, that continued harassment would result in a permanent ban from the store. She tried to argue, tried to shout, tried to film, but she had no allies this time. Every staff member, every bystander, every piece of documented proof worked against her. Eventually, defeated, she left. No dramatic exit, no final victory. Just silence. The relief that flooded through me was profound. Days of stress, the fear of humiliation, the exhaustion of navigating her manipulations at all, began to fade. And for the first time, I felt empowered rather than victimized. Later that day, I shared the experience with colleagues, not to boast, but to show that calm, preparation, and professional boundaries can actually win in extreme situations. We laughed. The store felt like a safe place again. Gianna's nightmare had ended, and so had mine. But more importantly, I had learned a lesson about power, patience, and how sometimes extreme people can be neutralized, not with anger or confrontation, but with calm strategy and careful planning. The morning after Gianna's storm of a visit, I stepped into the store with a sense of cautious dread. Her chaos hadn't ended with her departure. Overnight, clips from her livestream had spread across social media. In some, I was portrayed as rude or unhelpful, while in others, she had exaggerated her mistreatment. My phone had blown up with notifications, some supportive, some hostile, some downright absurd. I knew I had to handle this strategically. Panic and anger wouldn't help. What would help was documentation, evidence, and professionalism. I immediately pulled together all the materials, timestamps of interactions, screenshots of her posts, notes from the security team, and even emails from corporate confirming our procedures. Every interaction had been documented, every word logged. Manja and I met in her office to create a plan. We need to respond, but we can't feed into her drama, she said firmly. We'll post a professional clarification on our social media. No personal attacks, no emotional language, just facts. I nodded. Agreed. Facts win over spectacle every time. We drafted the post carefully. It outlined the situation, calmly explained store polity, highlighted the professionalism of staff, and thanked other customers for their patience. No finger pointing, no drama, just clear, concise information. Soon as it went live, the reaction was mixed, but the tide was beginning to shift. Some people questioned her narrative. Why would the employee follow policy instead of giving in to her every demand? Others praised our handling. Wow, they stayed calm, even under extreme harassment. Respect. Meanwhile, Gianna's followers weren't quiet either. She attempted to post again, trying to amplify her version of events. But now, people were calling her out, pointing out the security footage, and even referencing comments from other shoppers. The narrative had flipped. For the first time, I felt that we had control of the store. Even in the store, morale was slowly recovering. Colleagues thanked me quietly for staying calm, noting that her behavior had been extreme and exhausting. Some admitted they had been on the verge of losing their composure. It felt good to know I had not only survived, but also led by example, but there was still tension. Any day could bring a new escalation, a comment from Gianna, a return to the store, or further online drama. I kept meticulous notes of everything, prepared to escalate to corporate if needed. One of the most satisfying moments came unexpectedly. A few of the customers who had witnessed her tantrum posted their own videos and comments online, offering their perspective. They highlighted her aggressive behavior, her constant filming, and how she had disrupted the store. Those posts quickly gained traction, tipping public opinion even more in our favor, even as social media began to settle. I knew the emotional aftermath would linger. For days, I replayed the incident in my head, analyzing my responses, my tone, and my decisions. But each time, I realized I had made the right choices, staying calm, documenting everything, involving security, and reclaiming control strategically. By the end of the week, it became clear that Gianna's influence had waned. Her online posts were increasingly met with criticism instead of support. Comments pointing out inconsistencies in her story flooded in. She had lost control, and the public saw it. The store had survived, and more importantly, my reputation had survived and was even strengthened. The team celebrated quietly after closing that Friday. We laughed at some of the absurd moments, her dramatic hand gestures, the exaggerated facial expressions, and the way she had tried to manipulate other shoppers. But we also recognized how professionally we had handled the situation. It had been extreme, exhausting, and frustrating, but we had won without anger, without confrontation, and without bending the rules. I leaned back in my chair, thinking about how this experience had changed me. I felt stronger, more confident, and more aware of my limits. I had survived a retail nightmare that could have destroyed my confidence, my reputation, and my day-to-day life, but instead, I had turned it into a lesson in patience, strategy, and professionalism. Weeks after Gianna's store visit, I began to feel that the nightmare was finally over. Social media had largely moved on, and corporate had confirmed that our handling of the incident was exemplary. But the story wasn't completely finished. Gianna was still posting online, still trying to frame the narrative in her favor, and still attempting to intimidate through comments, messages, and hashtags. I had prepared for this. Every post she made was met with calm responses from corporate or documented and filed in case any legal escalation occurred. We had built a shield of professionalism that she couldn't penetrate. Her influence online began to shrink as more people sided with the truth. Her final attempt to return to the store was dramatic, but short-lived. Security was ready, corporate was informed, and I stayed back, calm and collected. When she entered, she tried the same old tactics: live streaming, yelling, threatening legal action. But this time, no one in the store was intimidated. Customers watched silently, staff remained professional, and security calmly guided her to a private area, explaining firmly that her behavior was unacceptable and she was banned from the premises. Her final defeat was almost anticlimactic. She left sulking, live streaming herself, muttering about injustice. But with no audience and no support, her efforts were meaningless in the days that followed. The team reflected on what had happened. We shared lessons learned, laughed at some of the absurd moments, and bonded over surviving what felt like a war zone. I felt a deep sense of pride, not just for myself, but for the way everyone had held their ground. Social media became quiet on the topic. Gianna's posts were met with criticism and mockery, while posts highlighting our professionalism gained traction. Customers who had witnessed the events in store shared their perspectives, reinforcing the truth and strengthening our reputation. Even personally, the experience left a lasting mark. I learned to remain calm under extreme pressure, to set boundaries, and to reclaim control without resorting to anger. The nightmare that had threatened to overwhelm me became a lesson in strategy, patience, and professional resilience. I leaned back in my chair, letting the relief wash over me. The storm had passed, the chaos had ended, and for the first time in weeks, I felt truly at peace. I knew that, no matter what challenges came next, I could handle them.